Beverly Benjamin George is here, and Jeanette, I believe, is here as well via a Zoom platform. Good afternoon, Beverly, and welcome to Voice of the People.
Good afternoon, friends. Jeanette, are you on the line?
Afternoon to everyone.
Great. It's so good to be here for the fourth and final installment of our 2025 VOP Summer Reading Program. And I truly hope that our listeners have been enjoying the presentation for the last couple of Fridays. And today's theme is safeguarding our intangible cultural heritage. And we will be discussing why it's important for us to collect and protect our stories, our culture, and our heritage, and things like Miss Peterson's story. And we're also going to learn how we go about collecting and preserving. And I hope that you enjoy today's discussion. I just wanted to announce this week's Facebook winner. We had Bree Walters, and she answered the question, what thickening agent is used to make stay tea?
Flour.
Well, I didn't know. Clearly she knew. Yeah. And she won a prize, which is the Symbol of Courage Legacy box, prepared by none other than Grandma Mary. Jeanette?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
For the past 3 Fridays, we have been discussing the story of Mary Louise Peterson, the Shanty from Breakneck, and the Symbol of Courage. Today, our final Friday, we will discuss why story and story hunters and storytellers like Sir Keithlyn are so important. To help us explore the topic, we have 2 amazing guests with us today, Dr. Hazra Medica and Joanne C. Hillhouse. But before I formally introduce them, let me share some information about them. Dr. Hazra Medica is a former award-winning journalist, having won both UNFPA Caribbean and local PAHO awards. She holds a doctorate from the University of Oxford, and she is the cultural advisor and the project lead of the nation's UNESCO-sponsored Intangible Cultural Heritage Safeguarding Project. Her work bridges academic research with community-level cultural advocacy. She helps Antiguans and Barbudans reclaim and celebrate their storytelling, language, and heritage. Welcome, Dr. Medica.
Thank you.
Joanne C. Hillhouse is a celebrated Caribbean author whose work spans adult novels, young adult fiction, and children's picture books. She, too, is a former journalist. She's the founder of the Wadadli Pen, a non-for-profit youth writing initiative launched in 2004 that showcases emerging and Antiguan and Barbudan voices. She has received numerous accolades, including the Burt Award runner-up for musical youth, and a 2014 novel, and the David Hoff Literary Prize, a UNESCO award, and notably the prestigious Anthony N. Sabga Award for Art and Letters in 2023. Welcome, Ms. Hillhouse.
Joanne is not yet with us, but we'll just move through until she gets here.
Yes. Now we're going to start with Dr. Medica, and we'll come together and have a panel conversation. So to Dr. Medica, UNESCO and an intangible cultural heritage, can you share with us what the Intangible Cultural Heritage Safeguarding Project by UNESCO entails, and what does this initiative look like in practice?
Of course, thank you. And I'm happy to be here to share this information. The Intangible Cultural Heritage Project, we have been calling it the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Project since we launched it. And the long title, which is something I'll only repeat once here because, nobody ever remembers it. I mean, sometimes I myself cannot remember this long title. The long title is Strengthening Capacities for the Implementation of the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage in Antigua and Barbuda. So as you can hear, that's quite the mouthful. So that's why we shorten it here locally to the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Project. And the Intangible Cultural Heritage Project, which is sponsored by the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund, it will create several firsts for Antigua and Barbuda, and I must stress Antigua and Barbuda. It will result in the nation's first ever National Living Heritage Inventory or Registry with the input and involvement of communities across Antigua and Barbuda. The inventory or registry is meant to raise awareness of key living heritage elements. So we're talking about the way we talk, how we cook fungi, that sort of thing, or music, their viability status, and sustainable pathways to safeguarding them. So we're not just creating an inventory for the sake of creating an inventory. So at the end of the day, we say, oh, this is a registry of Antiguan intangible cultural heritage elements, and it sits nicely on a website or on a tabletop. We are creating for the purpose of safeguarding. And so when I say creating for the purpose of safeguarding, this is why we've included 2 pilot safeguarding exercises, one of which has been launched already, and that is the Worry program, the Worry Revival program. So we have already trained 6 youths to be trainers. So these 6 youths, along with the Antigua and Barbuda Worry Academy, on the guidance of Mr. Trevor Walker, they will be training 500. Simon, sorry. Oh dear, I am so sorry. Trevor Simon. I apologize, Mr. Simon and Mr. Walker. Yes, on the guidance of Mr. Trevor Simon, they will be training 550 youths across Antigua and Barbuda, and an additional 50 adults or more, because the interest has been so incredible. We are seeing that it will be way more than 50 adults will also be trained in the game. And an additional component of that, in terms of an additional safeguarding exercise, will be a boat building program, which is currently on hold, because as you can imagine, building a boat is quite the endeavor, and we're now in the hurricane season, and it's not wise to be building anything right now. Right, yeah. So that is the Intangible Cultural Heritage program, for which we receive just under 98,000 USD from the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. We received this back in 2020, but as you can recall, what happened then, we had COVID, and so that caused some delays, and after that there were other aspects that caused delays beyond our means. So that is the Intangible Cultural Heritage Project.
Thank you very much. Are there similar intangible cultural heritage programs in other Caribbean islands beside Antigua and Barbuda?
Well, in the past, yes. Grenada, I think, would have concluded their project last year. They would have also been funded by the UNESCO ICH fund, and I can recall a project proposal by a group of Caribbean countries who were meant to revive traditional masquerade. I think it was Trinidad, Dominica, and I cannot remember the third country. I'm not. St. Kitts also, they had received funding under the same funding opportunity. They have completed their projects. I'm not sure if we had a newly selected Caribbean country last year. But what I can tell you is that the Antiguan project is massive in comparison to what has happened before. Because when I submitted the proposal after 8 months of field work, the one thing that stood out to me was people warning, listen, we're tired of talk shops. We don't want to hear that you're having workshops to create this database and then that is it. So I had to have a long chat with Paris, because they did ask me to exclude the Worry program and the boat building program. And I told them the people on the ground are not going to like this. They're tired of talk shops. They want to see tangible results. And, their argument was, well, the database is a tangible result. I said, for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, it has got to be more tangible than that. So our project is massive, and the delay did not help us, but we're back on track, and everything has been going, I wouldn't say smoothly, but it's been going. We have trained people in the to collect information at the community level, and that first phase is finished. So now I have information including the completed forms, audio information, video information, and what you will see in the next month or so, probably by the end of August, if not August, by middle September, is Antigua's first ever inventory of living heritage.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we've been diving into the book Symbol of Courage. It's a memoir rooted in the oral history shared between Sir Keithlyn and Mary Louise Peterson, a woman from Bendels who lived from 1914 to 1999. Beyond being a personal narrative, why are stories like this essential for our community?
Well, listen, if you don't know your past, how are you intending to plan your future? If you don't know who you are, I mean, the body of the amnesiac, that is the people without a history, it has long been thrusted upon us. We have been told over and over, the basic history we have is that we began as slaves in Antigua and the Caribbean, and that is not the truth. And it's not, at least it's not the whole truth. Certainly we do not call our forefathers slaves anymore. We have moved to, enslaved people, because, slaves suggest that it's a natural status, it's a natural way of being. It was something forced upon them. So we have long been forced into having the body of people who, with no history, people with no memory. And stories like these, they erase that, or they counter that, and this, excuse me, no, we do have a history, and we are people. I know Miss Hillhouse, in her book, Oh God, that's how you say it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just Oh God.
No.
It's Oh God, right. I remember a character, one of the characters, reassuring another character, you have Smaddy. And that is important. Being Smaddy is very important in Antigua and the Caribbean. And being Smaddy has so many important components. It means that you have people. So you have a history. So sometimes when I've often heard the joke, somebody say, "Oh, I know you have birthday too," and the person would respond, "What, you think me drop out a tree?" And that goes back to being Smaddy and having Smaddy. So you have a history. And if you don't have a history, can you claim? You can't claim Smaddiness, if we can call it that. So that's why these stories are important, and it goes beyond the claiming, where you need to transmit these stories so that the younger generation can also transmit those stories when their time comes. So that this idea of Smaddiness in a world that tells you that, are you really Smaddy? That a world that questions, are you really Smaddy? You can stand up with these stories and say, hello, XYZ. I am Smaddy. I've been Smaddy from a long time. I was Smaddy before they brought us here, that sort of thing. So that's why with the moving back to the Warrior Revival program, we can see that it's this ancient African cultural retention in Antigua, and it tells us, yeah, we were Smaddy from a long time. This Smaddiness didn't just start the other day. And that's why stories are important.
So with the fight for preservation, you've been involved in the efforts and legislative advocacy, which is aimed at safeguarding our cultural heritage. How successful have these initiatives been so far?
I would say getting a start alone is a great measure of success. This is something that the people have been clamoring for quite a long time. This is not something that Dr. Medica dreamed up in her White Castle or other members of the Education, Sports, and Creative Industries Ministry. This is something, it took 8 months of underground work, asking community, what do you think is needed? What do you think is missing? And at the end of it, the proposal that we submitted to UNESCO was the end result. So for intangible cultural heritage, what we have is projects like the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Safeguarding Project. We also, every time we host a carnival, Calypso, that's another expression of intangible cultural heritage. So there are projects which might not bear the official name, Intangible Heritage Safeguarding Project, but they are by very definition that. On the tangible cultural heritage side, that is more my accomplices in heritage. That's Dr. Murphy, that's his field. You're talking about the safeguarding of terrestrial and subterranean artifacts and buildings. So we in March of this year, Antigua was successful at passing its first ever Cultural Heritage Protection Act. And I would not dare to speak on that. That is Dr. Murphy's baby. I'm his accomplice, but I'm his accomplice in intangible cultural heritage. And I can say that he's currently in the process of putting things together so that we just don't have an act that looks lovely on paper, but an act that can be implemented. So he's working towards producing a registry of artifacts in Antigua and Barbuda, possibly Redonda as well. You never know.
Good, thank you. I see the work of everyone, past and present, has lit a fire behind everyone, and God bless your efforts.
You know,
Beverly?
I have a quick question with regard to the database and the inventory. How can it be accessed once completed?
Okay, at this point in time, it will be made available on the Antigua and Barbuda Cultural Information System online. That's cpoise.gov.ag. So a version of it will be made available. It will also be the full, more comprehensive version will be made available at the National Public Library and at the Museum of Antigua and Barbuda. What I'm also working on is how I can incorporate the information or have the information displayed on monitors at specific sites around Antigua and Barbuda. I'm looking at what's available to do that and what version would be would be showcased on those monitors. But you will have several versions of the database because it's going to be a large database. So I've said that the first phase is done where we've had data collectors trained to collect information. They've brought the information back, but this is not a one hit and done thing. This is something that will continue beyond the project's official end. Because culture is not static, culture is ever changing. So what is considered intangible cultural heritage now? So for example, fungi. The way your grandmother cooked or knew to cook fungi back in the 1970s might be very different or slightly different to the way that your mother and then your aunt, that sort of thing, and then your niece. And so it's a database that will be continuously updated. And also we have the Barbuda element, because when we had the workshop, because I always include my Barbudan people, and that is to say my Antiguan and Barbudan people. So when we had the workshop, we found out, fungi. We did not know that peas was an ingredient in fungi, in the Barbuda. Many of us did not know that.
So is soldier crab.
Yes, I found that out, and I found out some other incredible things that you will see in the database when it is produced.
So, based on what you're saying, there could possibly be a segment on the making of Dukana, and there will be a side link, a controversial link, someone would say, for those that embrace raisins in Dukana.
Listen, speaking as Hazra, no, we're not Dr. Hazra Medica, this raisin thing. Anyway, what the database will show is the variations.
Okay.
So we wouldn't necessarily call it controversial because, you and I might say raisin has no place in Dukana. Prince class did not know anything about raisin.
That's true.
It would have been too expensive for parents to be talking about adding raisin to Dukana. But, there's some people who do it. And as I said,
Dukana is not a dessert, so.
Okay.
You see, now you've started a war again. This always, and can you believe that this took up quite a bit of time in the workshop? Fungi and Dukana, inevitably they start a war.
The Dukana wars.
Yeah, the Dukana and the fungi wars. But yes, this is why when the data collectors go out, they don't speak to 1, 2 person, 3 people, that sort of thing. You try to gather as much evidence as possible so you can account for variations. So the reason people will be in there as well with their little videos or whatever. I'm happy for them, and
I like when you mentioned the whole idea of Smaddyism, because one of the things that we have to remember about colonialism, it wasn't just about exploiting labor, it was about erasing memory.
Yes.
So that's why this book was so important, and the whole concept of movement in memory and what you do in terms of trying to preserve that and to create a database that maybe my grandchildren or great grandchildren can have access to it and see what their forebears did, and they didn't just exist. They had memory, you know. Franz?
No, and I think this is critical. This is something that I've been asking for, right? The truth is that even though we are running a project like this now, there's a lot of data that is still missing prior to this iteration of that, because there are no people from before 1910, for example, that are alive in Antigua and Barbuda, and so the information would be limited. But I'm glad to hear that there is a start to be able to chronicle and document this. I want us to, as you build out this project, to be very aware, however, that many people don't have electronic access to information in Antigua and Barbuda. And so whatever we do, there must be an initiative to put this in the primary education and possibly the secondary education systems in Antigua and Barbuda, because of all the places that I've lived and been exposed to, Antigua is, and Barbuda is one of the places that we almost teach zero history as a part of our core education. And so maybe you can share a little bit as to if this information will somehow get into our formal education system.
Well, I am in the Ministry of Creative Industries as a cultural advisor, but so I cannot speak on education's behalf. But what I can assure you is that we're also planning to have hard copies of the database, and they will be given to the school libraries and that sort of thing. We have thought, we have tried to think of everything. And remember when I said this was a massive project? There's a component that I did not mention. The Precision Center, they will be producing a book on the intangible cultural heritage of Antigua and Barbuda, and that will be based on the documentary series that they created way before this project has started. So I think 2,500 copies of that book will be produced, and it will be distributed free of cost to school libraries and other places of information. We have really, I must say, I know in the past you might have heard promises, this is coming, this ground has been broken a long time.
Well, you have legislation, that's a big deal.
Right, we have been working hard, and I'm so thankful for the cooperation I've received from the National Museum of Antigua and Barbuda, the Heritage Department of National Parks. This is not just a Ministry of Creative Industries project. This is a collaboration between all three sectors, private, civil, and public sector, and I'm so grateful for that, because that means we're serious. And I've worked on projects before. I've been in this position for 10 years now, and I can tell you, not to dismiss what has gone before in the cooperation and collaborations I've had the opportunity to be at the receiving end of, but I have found my people. I have never found people so enthusiastic and passionate about safeguarding Antiguan cultural heritage like the current batch I have. You have tour guides, you have authors, they come from all over. You have the Antigua Barbuda Warrior Academy, the Precision Center, the boat builders, the marine community. I am blessed, and we are blessed as a nation. The passion is there.
But before we wrap up this section, I'm a little bit curious. In terms of these intangibles, one of the things that would come up in the documentation are rituals and practices. How do we document Obia as a part of our culture in Antigua, apart from, say, having a conversation, considering the conflict that on our laws, Obia is illegal? How do we deal with the oxymoronic or seemingly oxymoronic position that a cultural issue like Obia would bring for us?
Okay. Well, I've been going through the forms that have been submitted, and I can't say that I've seen Obia appearing as an element
What?
yet. Well, but there has been quite a lot of, there's been scholarly work done on Creole and Caribbean religions. And Obia is not, Obia, you see, what you've got to think about is how Obia is defined. For some scholars, it's not just about, oh, you know, I need Janie's man or I need Janie's money, that sort of thing. That's not what they're finding. But what we call bush medicine, some scholars are pointing that that was an integral part of what the plantation owners came to call obia. So I don't think you might realize it might not be as controversial as you think in terms of the definition that we arrive at. But as I said, information is continuously being collected. I think I did see a couple of entries from the Rastafarian community. So yeah, information is continuing. So I will keep you posted on any mention of obia.
No problem. Let's take the top of the hour and then we're gonna come back.
This is Observer Radio, 91.1 FM.
Well, listen, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to contain my excitement because, like, my personal superstar is here, Joanne Hillhouse. You know, I'm going to try to contain myself. But, Joanne, it's so good to have you. It's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in so long.
Yes.
The things one have to do to get to see you. But welcome.
I'm right here. I don't know what you mean.
I just have a few questions for you. Your writing, the stories that you write, usually highlights Caribbean life. Not just Antigua and Barbuda, but basically Caribbean life. When did you first realize, I'm like tapping into your source, when did you first realize that our stories, whether they're ordinary or extraordinary, deserved and needed to be captured and shared?
I think very early on when I started writing, I've told this story a million times, when my grandmother died was when I remember first starting to write. And I'm thinking of the earliest stories that I wrote, and they were always Antiguan stories because I was kind of writing the world I knew. I suppose at the time I didn't think that I could have a career as a writer, so I wasn't writing with the intention of this is going out into the world. Also, I think the earliest stories, the point of view might not have been centering, say, myself and my blackness in the way that it does now, but it was always Antiguan stories. It's just over time it evolved into realizing that I'm not interested. Calypso had a big part to play with it because I think Calypsonians, at least the Calypso era that I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s, was, it felt like they were telling our stories without fear or favor. It felt like they were unbuyable and uncorruptible. I mean, when Latumba sings, culture must be free, they can't muzzle me, that was a foundational song for me. So it's just kind of been fed into me throughout my life. And at some point, when I started putting my stories out into the world, it didn't occur to me that I needed to dilute it to fit. Because here's the thing, we grew up consuming stories from all over the place. And we have to figure it out, context clues, all of that. Why can't other people tune their ears in the same way? So I don't see my stories as even telling it. It's like it's written first. I'm my first reader, then my people, and then you can come and catch and hang out. But it's not catering to your ear. It's being true to itself. So that kind of has been an evolution over time. But it never started as I never wrote stories. I don't know, set in Vermont or where somewhere I didn't know. There was always Antigua based, but it was the evolution was where does the story sit in my imagination, and kind of leaning into, especially now, telling the stories more in our language. I mean, the collection I'm working on now, one of the most challenging stories, because it is an oral language, is at least in my experience of it, one story is written completely in dialect, not just the dialogue, which I've always done, but the whole story. And I did a test read of it when I had my open studio artist talk the other day, and it played pretty well. I mean, these are all Antiguan ears, but they were able to follow it and get invested in it, and I'm like, yeah, this might be onto something. So, to answer your question, when, I think it's always been, it's like this whole thing is a journey, so it's always been evolving, and it still is.
One of the things that, when I was reading Symbol of Courage, believe it or not, I was thinking of you. Why? Because when Aunt Dude was describing growing up in Nigger House, and she was describing how it is, the roofs are more holy than godly. I thought about you. Why? Because, don't start to laugh. Why? Because in reading your work, I see you as a tactile writer, in the sense that one of your novels, I remember you writing of someone exiting a plane, and just the description of the heat that hits you when you walk. This is when we used to walk down the steps. The heat, you described the heat that hit you. I had to put the book down because I'm like, oh Lord, I know that heat. You know, for you to sit and be in the moment and observe things that we would just pass by and not really pay attention to. That's what helped me understand that capturing a story is not just capturing the word. You have to capture the tactile part of it, the feeling, the smells. When you wrote about clay in Oh God, I can smell the dirt the way that you write. So is that something that you just naturally do, or, you know, is it something that you picked up because, or is it from listening and hearing? Because that's what I felt when I was reading Aunt Dude's words and describing, you know, what it was like being in, you know, and having dirt as your ground. There is no such thing as tile or linoleum in Nigger House. It's dirt. And by the way, reading this book, I understand the difference between jigger and chigger. I didn't know there was a difference, but there is a difference.
Am I a tactile writer? I think I am, in the sense that, well, writing for me is discovery and immersion. So, I mean, nothing takes me out of, like, say, watching a TV show or movie, and you see a dead body there and flies and stuff, and nobody acts like they're smelling anything, right? That, to me, writing, art, whatever, the story you're telling must engage the senses. And I always say I enter stories through character, but there's also this intangible thing of something that you can either, whether it's the feel of a ray of sun on your skin, or just some small moment that you can use to open a door, open a window to take you into the story. And as a writer, you have to be able to go into the story first before you can get the reader to come in there. Hazra has a story, Banana Stains, that I remember vividly because of that. What, you remember the story of Banana Stains? It was an award-winning story, by the way. She's a writer as well. And just the dripping, I remember that, right? It's like little details like that help to ground the story, I believe in. And I guess that also comes from Calypso, the details, the groundedness, not the dilution of the thing too. Because if you're diluting it, you're thinking audience first as opposed to story first. And I have a sort of inbred curiosity that feeds both my creative writing and my other writing. Like, for instance, right now I'm kind of obsessed with, as we mentioned food earlier, I'm kind of obsessed with Cassie, because I've been posting about Cassie on, I've done in my creative space column, the roots of a lot of our foods, especially, you know, like Dukana and pepper pot, and some of the names that we call them, choba and so on, and the African roots of some of those words. And credit to Joy Lawrence for a lot of the work that she's done in that area as well. But Cassie, I posted it because I was like, I don't think I've ever seen Cassie in any other country in the Caribbean. So I posted that and I said, anybody in the Caribbean,
Oh, Bonaire.
right?
It's a big thing.
Right? I've never seen it anywhere, right? So I posted, and then the responses I've gotten have commented on the Spanish roots of it in Southwest America and so on. And I'm like, okay, so is it? So to me, now I'm so far down the rabbit hole. I've got to keep going to figure out, okay, is it an indigenous thing that was passed on to us? You know, that kind of thing. So I'm just fascinated by little things like that. And at some point, even if I don't write about it for the column, it will work its way into a story. I gather things and I hold them.
You know what? That's learning.
Yeah.
That's learning. That's deep learning. Going towards the music, and Dude mentioned a lot about music in the book. And what we try to do every year when we have this program, we try to curate music that speak to the book. And what I've noticed through Mento, Bena, coming all the way up to what we have now as Calypso, if you sit down and you listen to them like we have on our playlist, it's almost like a master class, teaching you, showing you, without beating you over the head, really how our society has changed for good, for bad, for whatever. But at least it gives you a historical context, right? Do you find that, and I haven't been following the Calypsos for the last maybe 2 or 3 years. Do you feel like we are continuing that tradition in terms of, it's almost call response, sharing information about what's going on now?
I don't like to do the generational thing. Like, you know, that music was better than the other one. But I have had a sense, and this is not just, do we go on this road? Just in Carnival Jam, I feel sometimes like some recipes are being lost. Like if you say to someone, I said to someone the other day, this is not Calypso related, but they were talking about, there's a younger person and they were enjoying music from I would say my college years, my club years, dance hall. And they were calling it old school. And I was like, okay, that's fine, I'm older. But then I said, dancehall. And they were like, no, this is reggae. And I was like, no, this is dancehall. And kind of like explaining to them the difference between, as I experienced it. And I feel like we've had conversations like that about calypso and soca and jam, what Flames and Son used to play, we used to call it jam band music when I was a teen. And I mean, sidebar, there needs to be some kind of documentary on Flames and their impact on Caribbean music. As a small country, we tend to get erased from the narrative even within the Caribbean. So anyway.
Look, I'm just going to endorse that message there before we go to the break. Let's break and come back.
Yes, and that was Technical School by the Monarch. And even in that song, there's just so much history because it's talking about 3 pivotal times in our culture where we started off with an oil refinery, the building of the Deepwater Harbor where our cargo is, and you know, you makes you wonder how many people knew that Rat Island was where they held people with leprosy.
Cocoa Bay.
You know, they kept them there. If you're in the Leeward Islands and you suffered from that disease, you're going to be housed on Rat Island.
By the leper colony.
The leper colony. That's right, you know. And he talked about the start of the tourism industry. And what he was imploring is that Antiguans and Barbudans need to be in positions so that they can help control those industry. Everything old is new again. You would think that the song was written today. But that's a perfect example of storytelling and history over time. But I just want to ask you a question about Wadadli Penn.
Can I say something on the song?
Sure.
From a storytelling standpoint, what the song I think does really well is it's very specific about what's happening in its time.
Mm-hmm.
But thematically, it's very relatable still to our time. So, you know, this idea that you can't be very specific because I wasn't around when before the oil refinery was there, when people were planting potato and corn in that particular area. But I can relate to other developments that have been affecting other parts of our environment and agriculture and all of that. And I also have to shout out Marcus Christopher, who I believe is the author of
blessed
that.
memory.
And I know in his twilight years, because he mentioned it to me, that he was very interested in compiling and documenting his lyrics, but it was resources, to do it, which is always the problem. There's so many ideas and so many things, as Hazra knows, things scattered, and she's doing the work now of gathering certain things. But I remember that was something that he spoke about wanting to do. These stories are a window to the past.
Yes.
But they're also commenting on who and where we are now. As Hazra said earlier, it would help us to understand the future better, and hopefully not keep making the same mistakes.
And it's a yardstick to show us, just how far we've come in terms of development.
The sad part about the song is we're doing the same crap still.
Well, perhaps we need to pay it more. Getting to Wadadli Pen, I can't believe, I felt like you just started it yesterday, but this goes back to 2004. And you have been intentional and consistent with regard to this project. And, you created a space that allowed young people to share their stories and their voices. And what have been some of the most surprising and powerful stories that emerged out of that space?
Oh, wow, ma'am. When you ask a question like that, your mind goes blank. Okay, so with Adley Penn, I had just become a published author, The Boy from Willow Bend, when I decided to start with Adley Penn, and it was really about creating something that I hadn't had. I didn't feel growing up. I realized there was a lot more going on than I probably realized, but I didn't feel growing up that I had any Antiguan stories apart from, the Jumbi stories, the Nancy stories, what was on the radio. I didn't have an Antiguan book in my hand. So I didn't see the possibility, and I didn't have, there were essay competitions now and again, independence, tourism, but there was nothing that I remember focused on encouraging creative expression, certainly not in the literary arts. And so I craved that, and I thought, okay, there might be some other young person out there who craves that. And I didn't know what I was getting into when I started it, to be honest. But from the first year, there was a hunger for, so we don't have to write about the beaches and the this and that, we can just tell our story. And so when you ask me about the stories that stand out, it was people taking a chance and telling really deeply personal stories about abuse and about fears, and tying in that our folklore, stories about the Jabless and the Sukuya and all of that, that was encouraging and hopefully encourage them to realize that there's a space to tell those stories, even for yourself. But some of them have continued writing. 20 years, some of them have grown up and become writers themselves. So it's like, that to me is the rewarding part. Storytelling is not some glass castle thing. It's for everybody. Even if you don't become a writer, we all, from the Bible parables to the Calypso, to the Proverbs, and to the things that sustain us in terms of the sayings and so on, it's all story. And that is what I hope what Adley Penn has helped people to see.
Can you believe that it's been over 20 years?
Well, my gray hair.
You don't look it.
My gray hair. My gray hair says yes, I can believe. I live in reality, so I'm not going to pretend that the time hasn't passed. But when you're in the middle of doing something, you don't feel the passage of time. So in that sense, it was like when I realized it was over 20 years, that felt wow. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question to ask you, and basically it is, of the stories that you are familiar with and you've heard, you've written about, you've listened to, what kind of stories do you think are at risk of disappearing in Antigua and Barbuda? especially if we don't, thank God for Dr. Medica, if we don't intentionally try to preserve them?
Oh, that's a big one. I don't even really know how to answer that. What stories? I think it's one of the beautiful things about, I'm going to reference to Shoot Hard Labor. One of the beautiful things about books like that, the stories that are always in danger of disappearing, in my opinion, are not the big stories. Somebody's always going to document VC Bird or, I don't know, the people who are considered important. But it's the little details that can get lost over time. And so that's why I say we need to tell stories that are about our specific. And when I say our specific, that when I was getting up and going to school, what we used to have for breakfast, did we eat breakfast? What we put in the bread called pear, not the American pear, but our pear. So the idea, my point is the little details are the things that are at risk of being lost all the time because we don't think they're important, and so we don't write them down. Wow. So that's why when we're doing the oral histories thing, we talk to the people about their time, and and my mom used to do, tell the fact that they used to pick dums in which season and pick whatever in what season. Just the little details, I think, are always in danger of being lost because we don't write them down.
You know what's interesting? The part that we played at the beginning, which was Vince McCoy in the voice of Keithlyn Smith, his last interview with Aunt Dude, she said, I really appreciated you asking me these questions because it lightened up my head, and he said it's almost as though it gave her a new lease on life. She was always ready whenever he went to see her. How does collecting these stories, we think about getting the stories, capturing the stories, writing the stories, but what about the effect that it has, and that could go to both of you, what about the effect that it has on the storyteller? Sometimes we don't really stop to think about that.
Well, I think about it all the time. I can't say I don't stop to think about that. Mm-hmm. When I take a look at the videos that have been submitted for the ICH project, and you see a glow on the interviewee's face as they relate, I learned this from my grandmother, and this is how you do it. And then maybe there's a side war starting because, as usual, somebody's saying, no, you don't put raisin in the coconut, that sort of thing. It's a sense of affirmation because many times we need the big words. We think affirmation only comes from the outside, but when people approach someone and they say, well, we're here with the UNESCO National ICH sponsored National ICH project, and it already they get a sense, well, this is important, and what I'm about to say, these people are interested in it, and it's important. And so there's that affirmation of self, and that the memories that I have, they're important. And again, it goes back to being somebody, because if somebody's sitting here with camera, they've hooked a voice recorder onto me, and there's somebody scribbling furiously in a notebook. Wait, all of a sudden I'm really somebody. So in terms of impact, I see that on the videos. And even before, when I was a reporter, I was print, I was not electronic, but you approach people, and people always, there's always this glow. Yeah, maybe they went so and then that how it happened, and this, and that glow, like, okay, this idea of I have a voice and my voice is respected, and that goes.
Well, Smaddy Pickney.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Smaddy Pickney with words being recorded.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And it goes back, when we're talking about stories, what we must remember is that our tradition is predominantly an oral tradition. So we talk about stories, and we often, we bemoan, we don't have enough writers. Listen, we have plenty writers. It's just that our writers differ from what we've been taught. This is specifically what writing should be. My first encounter with literature was the Calypso. Of course, I was at an age, some things flew over my head, particularly with the bawdy calypsos. The calypso talking man and woman business and all of that. It would fly over my head, so I would get the hook, but then later. But, as I was studying, and I had the distinct pleasure of listening to Calypso every day for nearly 4 years. Wow. It was hard work, but somebody had to do it. And so a third of my thesis was dedicated to looking, analyzing the Antiguan calypso. And can you imagine, again, me in that position where I'm saying to a community like Oxford, the University of Oxford, listen, this is Antigua, we matter, this is what we have to say about our place in the world, our small island. And actually, our island isn't that small, because I'm here and I'm about to dodge a thesis in your very large library, and this would not have happened back in the days. And to go back to what Mr. Franz was saying about, sometimes we might have missed stories because we weren't alive in 1910, that sort of thing. The stories are there. It is to find them. When I was in the Bodleian Library, I found stories about Antigua. Sometimes they showed up in accounts from travel writers who would interview people on the ground. So it's all about, and the calypso alone, we have the most prolific writers when we're talking about stories in the Caribbean. If you compare the number of actual written texts to calypsos, you can see all calypsos are by far more prolific than our written or guys in the written tradition. So stories are all around us. When we say, like Boldface does say, that's a story. There's context behind that.
That is true.
Let me just engage. I smiled when you referenced calypso as literature, because that is not a concept that we believe in Antigua, especially as it relates to our education system, because nowhere in it do we say or teach calypso as literature. Nowhere in our education system currently. So maybe that is something we're moving towards. But as you were speaking, Joanne, about oral traditions, that is an African concept that exists today in Africa. So in the countries that I have lived in or visited in Africa, people want to leave the village, and they do, but everyone is permanently connected to the village that they are from and the traditions that they have learned there. And there is a specific tradition of stories being passed on from generations in the African village concept. Where does that happen in Antigua and Barbuda? What is the space that we have that is the equivalent of that African village?
I don't know.
The family.
I think, Franz, I think that going back, when they used to have the singing meetings was a core part of the oral tradition. We interpreted it in the Antiguan way and how we saw ourselves, but it definitely was part of that tradition that they were living, without even knowing it, because a lot of them people, they're good folks, but some were not very literate. But if they heard something, they won't forget it. They heard us hymn and so forth. So I think that was part of it.
Right. And that is the question that I'm asking, because the generation of singing meeting, I think all of us would sit down here and agree that wasn't yesterday. Right? It was some time ago. So I am asking so that I can find out where the connection is. I want to say calypso is a part of that. But even that, if you ask somebody today that's 21 about calypso, I think that you might run into a challenge for them to see calypso as literature and the passing on of history anyway in Antigua and Barbuda. So I'm asking, what is the vehicle or where it exists for us to continue to move the traditions that I had when I was a boy through the generations, even those that are unborn?
I think we have to shift the lens. And this is something I learned while while working on my thesis at Oxford. I was there. I was looking at Antiguan written literature and oral literature. I was looking at the work of Miss Hillhouse, Jamaica Kincaid, Short Shirt, Queen Ivina, Queen Singing Althea, and I was analyzing them through European eyes. I was talking about Freud and all of that, and then 6 months before my submission, it hit me. What are you doing? And then I had to take a sit back and say, okay, what is our worldview? How, if I were to look at this with Antiguan and Barbudan eyes, how would I analyze this? And then I'm like, what is the thing? What is the perspective? What is the thing? What is the lens that most people see the world through? And concepts that coming to me, like bad-mindedness. So imagine there's a thesis sitting in London where the analysis of literature, it's being seen through the concept of bad-mindedness, filtered through the theory of anxiety as Europeans see it, but through bad-mindedness as we encounter it, as we so there's this bad-mindedness that's attendant to the small place. So because we're in this small place, there's a bad-mindedness as attendant to our history, as an enslaved people, that sort of thing. So we might say, oh, where are the song meetings? Look for them in other places. Look for them in Lyman Spot. Look for them in the families. Because I know in my family, I'm not that old. I mean, in my family, stories are still passed. I learned that my navel string was buried under a tree in Golden Grove, a cherry tree, and it was the sweetest cherry tree until somebody decided to chop it down. And and via that I know that there was a custom of burying the navel string on the tree, that sort of, or the placenta for the youths on the tree, and then again in Calypso, that's where. So we have to stop. I think sometimes we have to stop thinking, oh dear, we have to stop lamenting on what is gone and look for where it still is.
Okay.
I think part of what Franz is asking about, though, is systems. What systems do we have in place? What organisms do we have in place to ensure that things are not just driven by the individual passion for something? Because I know, certainly from my experience in art spaces in Antigua, that means that sometimes things will just go away because the person who's passionate about it has either grown tired or is not doing it anymore. So I think that's part of it. But I will say, if I could jump in for a bit, because I've been keeping track of everything, I have a few things. The Bev here should get credit for the Friends of Antigua Collecting Memories project that they did. I remember you asking earlier about the benefits to the people telling the story. I remember the story that I contributed to that project. I went to a man's house and he literally demonstrated to me how to make cassava bread, which is what that story is about. And he just, I'm taking up his time, but he just wants to show me how to make cassava bread. And I took my niece with me, and she was learning, and he made her touch it, and it feels like cheese, and this whole thing. So I just have that memory for me, and hopefully a core memory for her. But it's little things like that you realize they want to share, they want to pass on. And the fact that projects like yours documented it.
Thank you for remembering.
Yeah, but the fact that projects like yours don't have the continuity is part of what we're talking about with the systems, right? For me, Calypso, to the point of Calypso as literature, when Fran said we, I don't know, I feel like I'm Antiguan and I can't be part of the we because Calypso is literature to me, right? So it too broad with that one. I think a fair amount of people do feel like Calypso is part of how we learn how language works and how we think about language. One of the Budadi Pen projects over the years has been trying to document the lyrics on the Budadi Pen website. I will say, I don't know who made the point earlier of sometimes they can't see it because I've asked people to submit the lyrics to your songs so I can put them on the website. I end up having to just listen to the songs and transcribe because a lot of times nobody's submitting the lyrics, right? And then I get people saying, oh, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong in the comments. I appreciate it because then I can correct it. Right. But after this last week, I got that's wrong. And I had to double check and I was like, no, it's right, it's okay. So that has been a project. That has been a project that, at some point it would be good to get funding to make it physical so that, if it ever, but again, anyway. And one last thing I would say, Hazra said about Bad Mind, and I thought right away as she said that, I thought my favorite is Spirit Tech, right? That's one of our things, our value systems. Like we know we meet someone, I'm a Spirit Tech the person.
It's Spirit Tech,
Yeah.
It's Spirit Tech
right?
a long time.
And I don't think that's something it's not Western, it's I'm not even sure if it's African, it's us. Right? And we know what we mean when we say it. So there's certain value systems that we can use to approach how we analyze and consider and even use our art. So,
wow. A lot of food for thought. Jeanette, you want to jump in? You just soaking it up like cassava bread.
All right, Jeanette, even before you jump in, let me take the break and then we will come back and start to wrap up. Let's take the break and come back.
Well, we couldn't end today's program without at least one member of Burning Flames being acknowledged. That was Onion and Stand Up for Antigua. I have one question for both of you. Based on the guests that we've had for the past couple of Fridays, one of the takeaways that we get is that we've learned that cultural erasure can happen both through neglect, benign neglect, or development. Is there a way that we can safeguard that to make it safeguarding heritage a national priority? How can we make that a national priority? And I tell you, the reason why I bring it up is because when we had Mr. Simon on, he talked about the disappearing of trees where you would get the seeds used to make worry. And I'm sure it's not because people are like, let's get rid of them. It's because of our own benign neglect and other reasons. So how can we make sure that preserving natural things are important and make that a national priority?
Okay, so what I would say is I don't think it's a one single way. I think the work that Hazra and Dr. Murphy are doing is a part of that. I think the stories we tell in our households and what happens in the schools is a part of that. I think columns and articles and media are a part of that. Conversations like this, my column, Creative Space, where I kind of dig into our history all the time. I think it's multiple ways, and different things are going to be important to different people. The politicians are always going to go for the shiny fruit, but we need to be able to push them by what we care about. So that, for instance, I write about the tree on Freemansville Road, and I hope by writing about it and writing about it, I wrote a fictional story that I put in my column called What the Baobab Knows, which referenced the whole King Court Rebellion. And my hope is that every person that, because every time I write or talk about it, somebody's like, oh, that tree, I didn't know about it, and whatever, and they learn. And hopefully it'll become as important to them as it is to me, that it doesn't disappear, because at some point things disappear because we forget about them.
Right.
So we keep documenting them so that they don't disappear. That tree is significant because in Stony Hill Gully was one of the areas where King Court and Mother Moria and all the others plotted the 1736 rebellion. That tree is hundreds of years old and has witnessed that. And to me, King Court is one of our national heroes. That tree is important to our collective memory. So I write about it. I write about it in fiction. I write about it in nonfiction. I visited the tree. I touched it for the first time this year. And everybody will have something like that. So my answer to your question is it doesn't take one thing. It takes several different streams. It would be nice if we had it as I think I'll let Hazra speak to that in terms of what the policymakers can do from that standpoint, if she wants to. But from my standpoint as an individual artist, it means that I have to find the stories, tell the stories, keep telling the stories, keep empowering other people to tell the stories, and that's one way we keep it alive.
I like that. Dr. Medica?
Okay. As a woman and professional approaching a particular age, I do not.
I want to know what that age is. Especially since you've been calling me Miss Hillhouse all day. I want to know what age we're talking about.
It's just, no, it's very, I grew up, it's always Miss or Mr. It's very hard to call people who are even slightly older, just slightly older.
I want to
as
know
you
how
are.
much you think I am.
It's hard to call them by their first name, so yeah.
How's you and I are the same generation? Stop it.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is, I have long come out of the tradition and fashion of lamenting. I'm here for solutions.
Okay.
I've heard all the problems, and I know I will continue hearing them. You come to me with a problem, I will try to solve it. And this is what this project is about. We've heard the lamenting, we've looked back into sources. I was a reporter, culture was my beat. So this is not something that I'm doing on the fly. This is a plan that has been long put in action. I remember when I was graduating, my supervisor said to me, "The world is your oyster," and I'm thinking Antigua and Barbuda and the Caribbean is my world. And most people ask, "Where come back for?" And it's like, this is what I was working for, to come back and to assist the Caribbean and Antigua in this manner. So before I talked about the pilot safeguarding programs, you mentioned the seeds of the used to play the worry. A part of that program is that we will be planting the trees. Exactly. So again, the problem was presented. I said, this is the answer. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, I'm tired here, this, I say, I could do this, I say, I could do that." I'm like, well, step out of my way and I will show you that it will be done. I'm a bit tired now, as a woman of particular age, of just lamenting and saying, this is the problem, I am here for solutions, and this is what my project is about. And I say my project because it's become my baby. I've fought long and hard for it, and I'm happy to have people fighting along with me. And so what you will have, you talk about, what will be done in the future. Many hands from diverse places in Antigua and Barbuda will have to come on board. But what we need and what is best is a national strategy plan. Okay. And this project, so when we're done with the worry safeguarding exercise, we'll see what lessons we've learned from it. When we're done with the boat building, when we've gone through all the interviews we've done to create the database, we will see, okay, this is what needs to be done. This is what can apply to other safeguarding measures. We'll see what elements people are saying should be saved, what elements we thought were, gone, but are still there. So this project will give us the impetus to go forward. So it's not more, so I'm not going to go looking through the results. Oh, Mother Joe said that people not doing bush tea anymore, and you just leave it at that. Then you look at ways to revive that. Right. And you do some research, because it's not, what we also have to remember is not everything that was old practice is good practice. Understood. And we have to look at the environmental impact and other impacts. So that's something. So that's why it's going to take a while. And what we will do is we'll formulate a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a long-term plan. As a woman and professional of particular age, I'm very much about plans and making contingency plans to support those plans. Because one thing I've learned from this project, your contingency plan has to have a contingency plan, has to have a contingency plan. So I can assure you that whilst I'm still breathing and have strength as a woman of particular age, I will continue the battle for safeguarding, along with my colleagues, for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in Antigua and Barbuda. And if we're done, then the other islands want to join in. I'm here for that as well.
I'm a little nervous about that particular age thing. Maybe it's just me, but okay. Well, I just want to let you know that Antigua and Barbuda, we are very lucky to have you. And I know that you could have selected a career anywhere in the world, but the fact that you came back to Antigua and Barbuda and you want to make sure that we hold on to our past, we are eternally grateful, and Miss Hillhouse, that's how we feel about you too.
She's an extraordinary writer.
She knows I love her to death.
I appreciate you saying that. I second what Hazra said about wanting to be here. Mm-hmm. We're not here by accident. We choose to be here. Antigua is our home and our project.
Yes.
Antigua and Barbuda. I'm sorry, Barbuda.
And Redonda. Yes. We're an archipelago, basically.
Yes, yes. And I know that we are going to take a break for the top of the hour. When we come back, we have 3 minutes. Okay, so before we go to the top of the hour, Jeanette wanted to give a tribute to the author of Symbol of Courage, who happens to be her father, as you know. And you will recall that when we first started this project 5 years ago, he passed away on the very last day of our summer reading project. And he was able to give us really good accolades about it. So, Jeanette, you can have the floor.
Yes, my dear. Thank you. So, Sir Keithlyn's work speaks for itself. I am sure that many people did not know what a prolific writer he was. He wrote every day. There was a time when he was a writer, editor, and publisher of The Trumpet, which is a newspaper written by the Union. He had many talents and he chose to use them to uplift his family, community, and country. He did not know how to be selfish, and everything he did to uplift people. His success as one of the founding members of the Antigua Workers Union was no accident. He worked day and night and in between. He felt it was his godly purpose to fight for the marginalized and, most importantly, our country's ancestors who no longer have a voice. As a prolific writer, he made many sacrifices to write the truth. And in vindication, his work has been used by many authors and researchers today. So Keithlyn had many oppositional forces who fought him every step of the way, but this did not stop him from fulfilling his destiny. Sometimes for him, it was as if he was Daniel in the lion's den, but like Daniel, he dared to stand alone. So today we thank him and ask God to bless his legacy and bless the works of his hands. We stand on his shoulders and we thank him for allowing us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take the top of the hour and then we're going to come back with our concluding remarks for this session. For this whole series of the summer reading program.
This is Observer Radio, 91.1 FM.
Welcome back to Voice of the People. Bev, you can wrap it up.
Yes, and again, please let me thank both of you for sharing your time with us. And the pleasure was all ours. So if you'd like to just have some closing words, we'd be grateful. Dr. Medica, we can start with you.
Sure. I won't be involved in any long talking. I just want to assure the nation of Antigua Barbuda, and if anybody's on Redonda, that we are hard at work in safeguarding Antigua and Barbuda's intangible cultural heritage. And also remember, we are SMADI. No matter what the world thinks of us and views us, we are SMADI, and we are working.
If someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The Antigua and Barbuda Cultural Information System.
Okay.
It's a website devoted to the sharing and exchange of cultural data and information. cpoise.gov.ag. Just click the contact us form and send a message.
Excellent. And Ms. Hillhouse?
Thanks, Bev, for all that you do. I really appreciate you. And in terms of my work, I continue to do my best to tell our stories. Creative Space is in the Daily Observer every other Wednesday. I have my Joe Hadley Writing Project workshop series. If anyone is interested in telling their own stories, and if anyone is interested, Corporate Antigua, if you're interested in sponsoring workshops of this type where people can learn different aspects of storytelling and tell their own stories, reach out to me via my website, joehadley.com, or just email antiguanwriter@gmail.com.
Excellent. Thank you. And Jeanette, any closing words?
Yes, thank you. This show has shown everyone that anyone and everyone is a writer. Storytelling comes in all forms. Oral history nowadays can be preserved very easily in a digital format and so forth. So in the spirit of authorship and oral history and preservation, I really urge everyone to just hit the record button and be spontaneous, and don't worry about being perfect, because I mean that's what we're here for. We're here to just keep building our heritage and contribute to every aspect of it. And being creative, someone may think of something that no one else has thought of before. So trust yourself, and thanks to everybody.
Yes, and I'll just end by saying thanks to everyone who participated in this year's event. And again, I'd like to extend an invitation to anyone who can make it out to Julie's this afternoon. We have light refreshments from 5:30 to 8. And, just hang out and say hello. Let me thank the sponsors of this year's program, Friends of the Antigua Public Library, New York, the National Public Library, the Antigua and Barbuda Tourism Authority, thank you, Colin, to ABCRE, to the Keithlyn Smith Foundation, Screwpine, and to our voices, Laverne Edwards, who embodied Aunt Dude, Vince McCoy, who embodied Keithlyn Smith, and of course, Miss Simmons, our tech, who is always, she's the new silent one. If you know, you know. And I just want to let everyone know, have a safe and enjoyable carnival. However, let's remember Aunt Dude's admonishment. Do not forget emancipation. Imagine the sacrifices that were made so that we could dance and celebrate in the street as free people. Let's go to watch night and imagine what our ancestors' hearts felt like on the night of July 31st, 1834, waiting for the midnight cry for freedom. Let's never be so ungrateful to forget their sacrifices. Happy Emancipation Day.
Bev and Jeanette, I want to thank you all for planning this year's edition of the summer reading program. It has been what? This is the 5th year?
It's the 5th year, our 6th program.
Yeah. And we are certainly happy and that you have done this on Voice of the People, and we want to continue to encourage people to study our history, do everything we can to learn about our past, since it informs our future. Thanks to all the guests that came here today for this